we enter into an agreement. Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah have various parleys, and we enter into the agreement in July of 1952, what is known as the Delhi Agreement. The Delhi Agreement recognizes that Jammu and Kashmir, the legislature, in that case the Constituent Assembly, can legislate on, has supremacy on all subjects except those which have been acceded to. Okay, it recognizes that the residuary powers rests with the, not with the central government in this case, but with the Jammu and Kashmir government. The Delhi Agreement recognizes Kashmiris as citizens of India, but at the same time it's enshrining a special status for them. I don't want to go into details about the Delhi Agreement because we don't have too much time about it. What happens after that? While all this deliberations going on, I'm talking about early 50s, many of our representatives, I mean Indian representatives, go to the Kashmir Valley. In fact, on the 14th of July 1953, S. Radhakrishnan goes to the Kashmir Valley and he writes a letter to Rajendra Prasad, which is forwarded to Nehru, where he says that if a plebiscite is held even today, and even if Sheikh Abdullah supports us, we are going to lose that plebiscite. There's a great fear at that moment that even if Sheikh Abdullah supports India, we may not win the plebiscite. The letter is there. Immediately, Nehru, and Nehru's note you can refer to, I think that was the 3rd of July 1953. There's a note made by Nehru on this topic, and Nehru talks about this as well. And Nehru immediately tells Sheikh Abdullah, ratify the instrument of accession in the Constituent Assembly. He thought that was the solution. He thought once you ratified, that's enough. He didn't want to face a plebiscite. We, of course, didn't have the situation to face a plebiscite because Pakistan was not going to withdraw from POK. So those situations existed. Now what happens is, Sheikh Abdullah was not fully in favor of doing this. He wanted an agreement, he wanted to look at other explorations of what are the other settlements possible. That is why on the 18th of May, and this is a very important fact, 18th of May 1953, Sheikh Abdullah forms the National Conference Committee on various solutions. And what this committee comes up with is, it gives like 4 or 5 settlements you can have. One of them they talk about is an overall plebiscite, and another they talk about is full independence. This completely alarms Nehru. He felt Sheikh Abdullah was always going to be with India. Now Sheikh Abdullah is even talking about independence. And in this moment of being alarmed, Nehru has a meeting with the then IB chief on the 31st of July 1953, B.N. Malik. And this is recorded in B.N. Malik's book, My Years with Nehru. And there they agree that it's time to get rid of Sheikh Abdullah. On the 9th of August, that was yesterday, 9th of August 1953, India makes the biggest mistake. We dismiss the Sheikh Abdullah government. In fact, Nehru on the very next day goes to Parliament and says, I had no role to play in this. Karan Singh, that's Hari Singh's son, is the one who dismissed him. And if you read Karan Singh's order, Karan Singh says the reason I'm dismissing the government is because of discord within the cabinet. Now, when was discord within the cabinet a ground to dismiss a government? But later on you come across a letter Nehru writes when Sheikh Abdullah is in jail. By the way, he was not just dismissed. Sheikh Abdullah was put to jail, and that was called the Kashmir Conspiracy Case. 1955, I think it was April 1955, Nehru's letter to Sheikh Abdullah where he says, you decided to take upon a line of action which I think was very harmful to Jammu and Kashmir, which clearly implies Nehru was the one behind the dismissal of the Sheikh Abdullah government. In place of Sheikh Abdullah, you have Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. Yeah, he becomes the chief minister, and the Congress party or Nehru actually gets full control of the National Conference through him. And it's in this position that on the 6th of February 1954, they ratify the accession to India. And remember, we spoke about Article 370. Gopalaswamy Iyengar in the Rajya Sabha in 1953 itself, August of 1953 actually. Talks about that it's time to get rid of Article 370. We are making them promises one after the other, and we are dismissing them. The Delhi Agreement recognizes that the head of the state, which is the governor, will be elected by the legislators. We decide no. We decide that we are going to have a governor nominated by the President of India. So again, a violation of the Delhi Agreement. And in fact, B.K. Nehru, who was the governor of Jammu and Kashmir and the cousin of Nehru, writes in his book, Nice Guys Finished Second. And I think it is in, if anyone wants to know, I'll tell you the page if you want to he will check on that. But there he says, almost every chief minister since 1953 was legitimized by rigged elections. Now I'll quickly go on to certain things. I'll just finish it off before I go into the 80s and 90s, which we can have after this. In 1964, actually 1958, when Sheikh Abdullah is in jail, he writes a letter to Nehru saying, even though I'm in jail today, I know that you are the only one who understands the problem thoroughly and you can solve this problem. 1964, the Kashmir conspiracy case is withdrawn, Sheikh Abdullah is released, and Sheikh Abdullah is invited to Teen Murti Bhavan where Nehru lives. And they have a lot of discussions, and it's agreed that to send Sheikh Abdullah to Ayub Khan, the Pakistani president, to have discussions. And what is the template of the discussions? It's actually what Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru had agreed in 1948 when they had a discussion with then British Minister Patrick Gordon Henry, where they talk about that if we cannot have independence, let's have maximum autonomy on both sides, on POK and Indian administered Kashmir. Sheikh Abdullah goes and to Pakistan, meets Ayub Khan, and it was on the 26th of May 1964. Correct me if my facts are wrong. It was on 26th of May 1964, Ayub Khan and Sheikh Abdullah announced that we are going to have a discussion with Nehru in June. Okay? The very next day, Nehru dies. On the 27th of May, Nehru dies, and Sheikh Abdullah believes that his entire hope is just shattered. If any of you all have seen the video or the pictures of Nehru's funeral, the person who cried the most was not Indira Gandhi. I mean, I know it sounds funny, but it's a very sad thing. The person who cried the most was Sheikh Abdullah. He was sobbing away. You should see that picture. It's beautifully documented. Sheikh Abdullah is covering his head and he's sobbing away. And then, if anyone wants to say anything, or should I go into 60s? Okay, does any...
At this point,
I think I will not need the mic. Alright. I'm making this intervention partly because I have to leave, but also because I believe that this discussion into the history has often been done in Indian discourse as an exercise in evasion. There is a historical controversy behind circumstances around Kashmir's accession to India. And there are multiple arguments whether Sheikh Abdullah really had great degree of support among all constituencies within Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir as we know it now. What was the strength of Muslim Conference? What was the strength of Jamaat-e-Islami? Or what was the precursor of Jamaat-e-Islami? There are multiple views. There are multiple views also on ways in which Indian state responded to Sheikh Abdullah and incarcerated him. But I think in 2016, too much of water has flown down Jhelum for us to go back to 1947. Regardless of what were the claims in 47, I don't think that in any way affects the current political situation. And I think large part of the exercise that's done is because good section of Indian citizenry as well as the intelligentsia wants to evade responsibility for what's happening right now. Yes, many of us may be opposed to Kashmiri independence, and the fact remains if you speak to a lot of Kashmiri people, they also may not be entirely enamored of Hurriyat Conference and some of the other current proponents of, or so-called proponents of independence who take money from both Indian intelligence as well as Pakistani intelligence. So even if we speak in terms of a political solution in terms of independence, I'm not so sure what would be the mechanics of it. And many of us certainly would believe that no person would justify what happened to Kashmiri Pandits and exclusion of religious and cultural minorities within Jammu and Kashmir, within the current subnational movement. But none of that in any manner justifies what's happening right now. The fact that nobody wants Kashmir to be part of Pakistan, or that many of us may not want Kashmir to be fully independent, especially given the close association, at least in legal terms, that India has had with Kashmir over the last 60 years, does not in any way warrant the current sort of clampdown that's happened in Kashmir over the last 25 years. And not just last 25 years, starting with probably arrest of Sheikh Abdullah, the gradual subversion of democracy that has happened. If we claim that Kashmir is an integral part of India, then I think all of us need to hold Indian state accountable in the same manner as we will in terms of Indian state's response and treatment in other Indian citizens. I think day before yesterday in Hindu, Wajatullah Habib wrote a op-ed piece on saying that where 120 people are dying, why do we report it as Kashmiris dying and not as Indians dying? And just as 120 people being shot dead by CRPF or by other paramilitary forces in Delhi should offend us, should cause tremendous consternation among us. I think routine death of 120 people in a matter of months within Kashmir should also offend us. Just as suspension of newspapers in India or in Delhi or West Bengal would be seen as unimaginable, we should see suspension of newspapers in Kashmir also as unimaginable. And I think many of us go back to the historical developments primarily because we don't want to confront the current day reality. And I think we also need to acknowledge that Indian state has often reacted with fear, reacted with paranoia. The point Arvind was just making about Radhakrishnan writing back and saying that India will not win plebiscite. I really wonder how many people Radhakrishnan spoke to, because there is within Kashmir a great degree of diversity between the Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, between the Gujars and of course the other ethnic communities, whether it's the Dogras, whether it's the Punjabi Hindus or Sikhs, as well as the Buddhists. And often Indian state has overreacted. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of how Indian state in attempt to try and clamp down and secure Kashmir has actually hurt its cause. If you look at the murder of the previous Mirwais, the father of the current Mirwais Umar Farooq, he was assassinated allegedly by Hujbil Mujahideen militants when he tried to open a negotiation with Indian government. This should have been an ideal or probably a very good way of showing that so-called proponents of independence are not really averse to killing respected legitimate leaders within Kashmiri polity. And yet the very next day there were some 55 people killed by BSF during a procession which was there to protest killing of the previous Mirwais. And what should have been a case for throwing light on the shenanigans of Pakistani sponsored militants became essentially an indictment of Indian democracy. Many of you know of the Patribal killings which happened after the Chhattisingpura massacre, where 35 or 36 Sikhs were killed around Bill Clinton's visit. And yet, instead of bringing to book those who were actually culpable, Indian army, because probably they were under pressure, ended up picking up 6 innocent villagers and killed them. CBI, it's not some Kashmiri police, it's not some Hizbul Mujahideen or Jamaat-e-Islami. CBI in its charge sheet found that it was a conspiracy led by few Rashtriya Rifles officers. And yet it's 2016, yet not a single officer has been convicted. The only thing even the Supreme Court admitted was court-martial. And when the crime is murder, court-martial and red mark on career or loss of promotion or loss of pay is not really commensurate with the nature of the crime that has happened. And again, what should have been an occasion for us to emphasize on the brutal nature of the insurgency became a way for Indian state to show that it doesn't care about Kashmiris. And if you see the entire set of killings of Kashmiris that have happened from 2008 onwards, it's not that we are killing terrorists. Yes, terrorism is a problem, but if you ask many of the army officers, they themselves would admit that terrorism pretty much is in its last stage. Infiltration has come down. Very few young Kashmiris are taking up guns. And yet from 2008 onwards, we have had massive problems, protests by common man. If you go back to 91, 92, we never saw protests during ambushes, during encounters. Yet we now find ordinary Kashmiris coming up and hindering army operations when operations are going on against terrorists, which speaks of the great degree of support that now, not in terms of terrorism, but ordinary Kashmiris who earlier might have been agnostic about this tussle between Hizbul Mujahideen, JKLF and LET and others on one side and the Indian state, most of them are now completely against Indian state in some way or the other. And I think we need to interrogate why even in the worst days of 1991, when a large section of Kashmiris seemed, if not pro-India, were fairly indifferent to the Azadi movement, are now speaking in language of Azadi. And that's happened because of Indian state and its refusal to acknowledge what should be the democratic rights of Kashmiris. If we believe that Kashmir is an integral part of India, then the same constitutional rights that apply to every citizen, the same standards of democracy that applies to every citizen in India must also apply to Kashmiris, regardless of whether Kashmiris want to be part of India or not. Regardless of what their political views are, they have the same fundamental rights that we as Indian citizens have. And same has worked elsewhere. Insurgency was settled in Mizoram not by guns, but by a peace talk. Nagaland, yes, there hasn't been a formal settlement, But since 1997, there has been a ceasefire, and to a fair degree, agreement on some of the contentious issues have been arrived at between SCNIM and the Indian state. And Nagaland is way different from what it was in 1997, not by virtue of army gunning down every citizen, but by Indian state creating a space for democracy, by creating a space for civil society. If you look at Assam and the gradual decline of the Alpha movement, again it did not happen because of civilians being shot down every second day by CRPF. It happened because the democratic process was launched, and we find a great degree of respect for basic democratic rights of people. Many of us grew up, I grew up in Assam in 90s, and some of us know how horrific it was as a 14-year-old to be picked up by the army officers. We were Bengalis, and most Bengalis saw army as a protector against Alpha and others and Asu who protested against Bengali outsiders. But as a 14-year-old, we saw how oppressive it is when you are picked up just because you might potentially be a dangerous one. And people who are from 1,000 kilometers away who did not even know the local language recognized and asked us, where are you from? Asked us what your identity is, where your home is, and how offensive it is for somebody to be picked up just outside your home and to be asked by someone who's away from more than 1,000 kilometers away, who does not even speak the local language, and emphasizing on, are you an outsider, are you a local person, and the optics of it, the oppressive nature of it. And I think Pratap Bhanu Mehta had written a op-ed piece few months back. The problem or the surprise is not that people throw stones. The surprise is that why not everybody throws stones. Because if you live in that oppressive situation, most people would be anti-India. And if you look at 1947, and the very people who were supportive of India have now started speaking against India, I think it's upon all of us to introspect why that has happened and why we have allowed the Indian state to carry on with its policy with impunity. And I think our focus should be on the current policies, not so much on 1947, because the reality is, for whatever said and done, India has much closer relationship with Kashmir than Pakistan has now. Clock is not going to be turned back to 1947. Even Indian state has given up for all practical purposes its claim on Pak-occupied Kashmir. Apart from few percentage claims, we don't really make any objection to the fact that Pakistan still is in control of 1/3 of what was earlier the Kashmir state. So I don't think discussing history serves a lot of purpose. What should be asked of us is that, is the Indian state performing its functions in light of the constitutional duties? And as Indian citizens, do we see Kashmir as our own? And why we have allowed a certain kind of policies to be practiced, the sort of complete indifference we have, the ignorance that we have of Kashmir, and also the impervious way in which we react to deaths of 120 people, 150 people, 200 people in a year, and the routinized manner in which violence is done. I think blood is on each one of our hands when we unquestionably accept these policies, when we focus only on terrorism. If you look at the data, no terrorist survives for more than 4 or 5 years on average. And in fact, Indian state, for all purposes, Indian army has pretty much destroyed militancy. There are not more than 100 or 200 people, even according to the statistics of Indian armed forces. And if you look at a Bombay underworld gang, that will have more than that many number of people. So we need to understand where terrorism lies right now. The problem is the alienation of Kashmiri people because of the policies of Indian state. And I think that's something that we need to question, not the history of what happened in 47 or what happened in 1951, as much as that's relevant. But I believe that that's done because we do not want to often confront the current day reality. I'm sorry for intruding so much on your time, but I thought